Hello and welcome to The Green Stream, a podcast brought to you by Sustainable Business Network Detroit, a network of partnerships between Southeast Michigan stakeholders, innovators, and changemakers. Each partner is on a mission to advance and amplify sustainable business practices, and we're here to learn from, share, and help activate a sustainable way forward for Greater Detroit. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Leave us a review and join the conversation on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And head over to our website, sbn-detroit.org. Now, let's listen in to our conversation with today's sustainability leaders.
Hi, my name is Nancy Kaffer. I am a columnist and member of the editorial board of the Detroit Free Press. I live in Detroit. I read a lot about the city and follow environmental issues, and I am really excited to be here today with Raquel Garcia from Southwest Detroit Environmental Vision, where she has been the executive director since 2019. Raquel, I'm going to let you talk a little bit about your background and experience.
Well, I started as a board member at SDEV and volunteer, and then a board member, and joined as the director. Prior to that, I had worked with Global Detroit, working with immigrant, communities and in Detroit and in Hamtramck. And so even before that, students in Detroit at Wayne County Community College. So my entire last 20 years have been working with residents and students and finding out what they want to do and connecting them to resources. And so that's been my trajectory for the last 20 years.
That seems like a really important lens to bring to environmental work.
Absolutely. I am an example of that. I'll tell you a little story why I think this is important. So I lived in Hubbard Farms. I live just a little bit north of that now. And everybody knows when you fall in love with a neighborhood and you want to buy a house and you're so excited. And I had friends that live there. And so that's how I was, getting to know the neighborhood. And I bought a house, and then shortly thereafter had a son. And all of a sudden he had like high lead levels, and immediately I looked up and said, when I started talking to my neighbors, I thought, oh my God, how did this happen? And I looked up literally and I said, has that bridge always been there? Of course it was. Have these trucks always been coming up and down? Because they were counting trucks, right, and doing a truck count, and which we've done with, even recently. And then I saw all the industry, south of us. And it just like you wake up, and you feel that the environmental landscape you tend to think of scientists, right? Or people that are trained in environmentalism or science or, biology. So it's really important to know that, as a resident, as just a regular person, that you're kind of your own scientist, and you most of all know what you need and how you're being affected by the neighborhood, the climate around you. And so that's it is a really powerful framework. If we could get a lot more people to say, my voice and my experience and vision is important and critical to how we are receiving the environment right around us. And so, especially health wise. And so it is, and so I listen through that lens, as you said. I when I knock on doors and talk to people, I take it very seriously, because I was that mom that felt this physical pang when I thought, I didn't even think to ask, I want to buy this house here. Should I ask about air quality, or should I ask about water quality? Those are not things that occur to people.
Right. They're really not. And we also, unless you're pretty deep into studying environmental regulations and policy, I was surprised in my own reporting to learn, for example, that we often calculate safe emissions levels based on their impact on an adult body and not a child body, and that we don't necessarily look at the cumulative impact of emissions, that they're all treated, in isolation, and that unless, but we don't live in isolation. We're subject to all of those various things. I live in Southwest Detroit like you, and but these, you're not simply taking in these materials from one specific source.
Right.
They all exist in the environment. And that was a surprise to me, because I think that you think that, oh, well, the people in charge have figured this out. And sometimes it's really surprising to learn that sometimes the policies we have don't really seem to make sense. I guess I'll go on and say that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's why we need many more people, residents especially, who experience their neighborhood, mm-hmm. or a footprint, right? Like we call it a micro neighborhood, because mm-hmm. People say Southwest, but right. They could be very different at the tail end, or so it's really. Mm-hmm.
I was thinking about Southwest Detroit one time in terms of the size of our neighborhood, because I live, just like within Southwest, it's a neighborhood, but then there's like dozens of neighborhoods within the larger neighborhood of Southwest. And I was looking at sort of where in a past administration, where our elected representation was coming from. And it's like, there's more people in Southwest Detroit than there are in some of the small communities where state legislative leadership came from. And that doesn't mean you can't have a great perspective on things, or you can't, you don't have to be from a community to learn its issues or know its issues. But it was really interesting to me to think about in terms of my neighborhood. Even my little part of Southwest Detroit has more people in it than some communities in our state do. And so, yeah, like you said, Southwest, we're one big area, but within that, we're these very different, distinct areas with their own identities. And that is, I think that's a good distinction to bring to this conversation too, that we have different needs in different communities and different conditions.
Absolutely. And that is why, and I keep why we need so many residents to learn about, or bring their issues to the table, seek out resources. And sometimes, so that's a whole outreach conversation, because what does seeking out look like? And we often find people that don't know that there are resources, and so mm-hmm. But when you do find them and they seem really activated, not only do we need to connect them to to some of the issues, but also the representation, right? We need to go and go to all the coffee hours mm-hmm. and get to know them, find out who their legislative aides are, and really be in communication when something happens. And I'll just give you an example. Yesterday, I was driving through Fort, coming home from an errand, and you're in your house. I'm in my house usually, and probably people in Southwest didn't see this, but there was an accident or something, probably on Springwells. So the trucks mm-hmm. wrapped around all the way, possibly to 94. And, so these trucks probably sat for about a half hour to an hour. And just from a visual count, I saw at least, 60 trucks just, from Grand Boulevard all the way around all three lanes. And then I looked left to south and saw probably another 50. And so we sat in this, you're talking about the cumulative effects, right? So we're sitting in this, emissions soup for about an hour, and it lingers, and then we have water quality issues, and then we have our own internal homes might have toxins and lots of dust, and so there is this like layering of toxic chemicals and particles that we need to really become familiar with. And like I did as a mom, I thought, oh, I got to go to the doctor and figure out what to do with my son, and I thought, that's because I got a test on him. How many more children are out there that don't their parents don't have an understanding of what's going on. And so when you, just going back to what you said, the cumulative, how do we understand that? I think it's really complicated, and we need a lot of stewardship from the decision makers around us to really, really learn. If we are talking about teaching ourselves and teaching, helping residents connect to these things, we really need our legislators, our, people, decision makers, in the city of Detroit and all around us to really, really understand this problem even more than us, right? Because how do we begin to comprehend cumulative impact?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, because there's so much that you can do. There's only so much you can do as a citizen, and then you need to have other folks who are willing to kind of carry that forward for you in the decision-making spaces. So no, absolutely. It's a complex ecosystem of information, decision, involvement, and coordinating all of that is obviously a full-time job for people like you.
Yes.
So in your work that you do, how do you view sustainability from the Southwest Detroit environmental vision perspective?
Well, it's going back to that word again, complicated. It's complicated because, if you look at the history of Detroit and Southwest Detroit, we are interwoven with industry. If you look at the maps and you look at the businesses in Southwest Detroit, we have been, located to the, next to the bridge and highways. We're surrounded by highways. And so we don't tend to think of industry and business as an enemy. They've been here for a long time. We really believe in, quality of life. So if somebody can get a job nearby, that would be great. If they can walk to some of the places that are around us and be home in 5 minutes, that's fantastic. And, you don't need to buy a car. So, but I also, we also believe that, that these businesses have a responsibility, to, it's a new day, I think, in Detroit. They have a responsibility to really also be involved in the impact that they have on residents and the air, and to be, involved in the evolution of their companies so that they are looking at new practices. So sustainability for us is, how do we keep our jobs here? How do we keep businesses thriving? How do we keep the economy healthy, but also not create any more sacrifice zones, recognize the ones that exist, and the great leaders in our neighborhood that have been doing this work for many, many years. And like Vincent and Teresa and 48217 and Catherine Savoy, who's been doing this for so many years. How do we say there was a time when there was not a lot of enforcement and we can't look back, but we are here today to really work with, businesses to have conversations around their practices and talk about what are the new practices, what are the grants and incentives for businesses, how do we, really work on, stopping the impact of their business on the residents and the environment, of the residents that live here, of the neighbors.
Yeah. So, that's a pretty big mission that you have, improving the environment, strengthening the economy, working with residents, working with businesses, working with government agencies, communities on a whole host of issues, from air quality to blight, illegal dumping, land uses that are consistent and compatible with the purposes of the neighborhood. So pretty big job. What are some of the challenges that you have in trying to execute this mission?
So we're a really small team right now. I think the challenge, is, it's a question: do we grow, or do we build systems that but that help residents do some of this work with us? How do we create our own sustainability? Is to develop a pipeline of young people that are involved in their own neighborhoods, that understand the issues, and are, have access to the tools, like voting and attending meetings, and, access to data, like the Air Monitor Collaborative that is happening right now with the Ecology Center. And just really, when we talk to residents, how do we connect them to that resource and help them, follow up and connect them to people? It is really big, and it's not, there's no way that Southwest Detroit Environmental Vision can do it on its own. We work with a team of people at Kaffer, and the Community Action Plan for Healthy Environments, right? And so it's a large table of people, and we often break up tasks because it is really big. And, I feel like that we, folks that have been working on climate change and the environment have been like working really, really hard. And I feel like everyone's talking about it now. So it's really a beautiful golden moment where everybody's actually paying attention and realizing what it is. And all of a sudden we feel like all of us are behind the 8 ball, and we have to catch up really fast. And so we need a lot of people working on this together with us, because there's no way that we can do it. And I think that we really need a team of residents with us, going to meetings, talking to people, writing letters, paying attention to policy, paying attention to permits, all those kinds of things.
So can you talk a little bit more about civic engagement with residents? How do you do that? You've mentioned a couple of things, but could you go a little deeper into how you do civic engagement, community engagement? Are there best practices? Are there things you found that didn't work, or just talk a little bit about how that looks like, what that looks like.
Yeah, so we know that what we want is repeat customers. We want to knock on some doors and dive in with people, and build deep relationships, deep roots with people, and find out what's really motivating them. We could, for example, knock on a door and say, we've got your little sheet here, and you say, here's our project. We're going to invite you to our project. And it might not speak to, you might talk to 50 people. It might speak to one person because, it's
not everybody's interested in the same stuff.
Yeah. And so, but if you knock on a whole block and you knock on 10 different streets, and you find, 15 people that are really concerned about, one thing like speed bumps or trucks, or whatever the issue is, now you can sort of build teams and put them in communication with each other. And there's really powerful leads in the neighborhood. And the minute that you say to them, a community member, you say, hey, I've got 10 people that want to come to this meeting with you, or wanted to learn about this, or let's do a Zoom call so they can meet you and you can give them an update. That's really the most, powerful way to build a network in the neighborhood, understand what's happening, connect them to resources. And usually when they feel connected, they start calling you about things like, hey, my friend is asking this question, or when's the next meeting? And so we really believe in this sort of interconnectivity, and also just really long range vision around, projects. We are working with a few schools right now. So all of that work stopped because of COVID. Everybody was at home, we know. And so we are kicking off some work again, and we're in some schools. And I keep asking my teammate, so what does it look like 5 years from now? If we're doing work with a freshman at Western International, like 5 years from now, what are we doing with that freshman? How do we build a long range plan so that what they're learning now, we can help them connect to internships. Right. We can help them connect into programs. We do know that most people, when we connect young people to, something that connects to them, like 3 asthma students, students that have asthma, now realize there's a monitor near them, now are telling their parents to stop their cars from idling, now are telling people, hey, when you idle, I get sick, and we shouldn't be sitting in our cars with our engines on. It's really great to see that. It's really great to see young people.
Well, and you raise a really fascinating point there is, students at the high school, they may live in the neighborhood or they may not live in the neighborhood, but they're spending, I don't know what, 30 to 50 or more, if they have sports, if they have extracurriculars, they're spending a lot of time in the neighborhood. And if they're not residents of this immediate neighborhood, they're still getting a huge dose of whatever is in the air, whatever's in the water, whatever in the built environment. And a lot of times there's not a recognition that people who use the neighborhood but don't necessarily reside here are exposed to that. So is that something that was I think that's amazing that you guys are building that in. And I wonder, I seem to see more recognition of that kind of getting around. Do you have thoughts on how that has evolved to include engagement and has evolved to include that, groups like students who are here present a great deal of the time, present maybe even more than someone who works, not out of the neighborhood but lives here?
Well, and they've got the ability to carry it right to other places. And so, we are working with 4 schools in other parts of the city. We're beginning that work, so I should say that. So we're beginning to do that work, and and we are, also telling people that come into the neighborhood. For example, let's just say that, well, let me back up. Most of the industry, right, is around us. They don't live here, and so they're leaving.
Right.
They come here, and I always want to build this visual in people's minds, but I'm looking out my window right now and I see 2 to 3 different, locations with trucks on them. And those folks, right, those owners, they don't live here, but their activity affects us, right? So that's one thing, right? We've got this reverse commute, and people come in and have this activity around us, but they don't live here. And also, like you said, there's also a lot of people that come and visit. A notable example is the park that's just behind the post office, right? We've got that beautiful park right next to this concrete facility. It's a concrete facility, and you come down here and you have a beautiful lunch and you go walk down the river, and you don't realize that you're getting an hour's worth of particulate matter, and you don't know why, like, you're having this sort of breathing issue. Or if you're in it enough, you're visiting and you're in this environment, and you're drinking the emissions, right? You're inhaling it. And so I think it'd be really great, some of the work could include signage, so that folks realize what we're dealing with here and what they're taking back. The problem is, here it is if you go to the Michigan, the Eagle EJ screen, it's a, there's a tool that anybody can go. You can just literally put that into your browser, Michigan EJ screen, and it'll take you to this, this tool, this website, and you can put in your address, and it'll give you a sort of like a heat map with colors. Put in your zip code or put in your address. And, we know that we're a corridor because of the Cumming Bridge and this bridge, and of course 75 and 94, and then we've got the river, which also has its own set of emissions and pollution. But because the air doesn't know boundaries, it goes all the way up into Oakland County. You'll see how how it's burgundy and purple right around the downtown area, and then it sort of travels out when you look at particulate matter, when you look at
I'm looking at it right now. This is shocking.
It's So
everyone should go to this website, Michigan. I just literally did what she said. I typed in Michigan EJ screen, and I got to this map where I put in my address, and now I'm learning some things about air quality on my street. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. It's just
and there's filters. You can look at specific chemicals. I think you can also look for health impacts. Like, for example, if you want to say, I'm looking for a cancer zone, like what is the level of my neighborhood or whatever. You can just kind of mess around. I don't know.
Do I want to know if I'm in a cancer zone?
Do I want to see this? But it's a really great tool, and I think the EPA also has one. They're still in development. There's a couple of issues that they were doing some listening sessions, and people were still making comment. But it's a great tool, and you can see how it travels. So if people think I'm going to come to Southwest and poor Southwest because they're affected by emissions, it's traveling all the way up to other areas, and to Midtown, and all the way up into Oakland County, and other areas. And so it doesn't stay stationary, and so that's why it is really important that we really look at the best practices for reducing emissions and other not just mobile sources. There's industry, there's manufacturing, mobile sources like trucks. We need to really, all of us, learn and do the best we can to lobby industry and for regulation also, to get everybody up on board with less emitting or zero emitting.
Right.
That's actually ideal.
I'm looking at this all the way up into Macomb County and Mount Clemens. You're not safe, Macomb County. You need to get on the train here. This is wild. Like, okay, I'm shutting this browser because otherwise I'm just gonna like mess around with that instead of instead of talking. But I'm coming back to this later. I'm sort of grateful you showed this to me, and also sort of like, ignorance is bliss. So no, ignorance is not bliss. It's good to be informed. That's why we're here today. So you mentioned talking about mobile sources of emissions. You've also mentioned before about talking to high school students about gas engines and stuff. And you've worked a lot on correlating the dangers between gas engines and respiratory illness. You mentioned working with students. Can you talk about some of the other ways you're trying to help people understand this risk and harm?
Sure. So last year in the fall, the Asthma and Allergy Foundation released a report, and it says that Detroit is #1 worst city if you have a breathing ailment. So that's really shocking, right? And so that just hasn't left my mind. And I honestly have been expecting a response from the city of Detroit, from the health department, from somebody, that can help build a plan. And we've been asking about it. And so so what can you do, right? So if you live in this thing that you can't control, what can you do? So we're really happy to work with Kathleen at the Allergy and Asthma Foundation, and she's done a workshop for us. We're trying to get it done in Spanish, or connect to someone that can translate it. And I think that what has to happen is that, you need to immediately start looking at what you can do inside your home, what to do when it's bad outside, really understand your own health and do the best thing, possible. So does that mean staying indoors, or, learning about how your home operates, how your furnace operates. And also they've got a project called Heal, and it actually teaches you how to work with your body and to learn about all the resources. So we are working with parents and students at a couple of schools, trying to get a couple of workshops going. Once they get the information, it sort of changes. That they want to know more. What can I do? What does this mean? And unfortunately, it's not just air quality. I mean, there's a lot of lead in Detroit. They just expanded the program. I just saw that they expanded the program. And that means that parents need to know. They need to test their own homes, or, you can purchase the tests. And there's a lot of things that we don't do. We don't work with lead, but anytime we have a parent in front of us, we're going to connect them to additional resources. There's also been, the city of Detroit has a project that we're trying to learn more about right now, but they've also been in some neighborhoods doing some testing for water. And, it's like, you need to know what you're drinking. I know they're trying to replace some lines really close to us. And so there was a person walking around handing out little sample containers. So I think the responsible thing to do is, for a parent, anyone, to really understand, the things around them. So we want to, once we get a hold of this person, have them do a workshop on how do you read your water quality notification that you get yearly. What do you do? How do you connect to the Asthma and Allergy Foundation? How do you test your house for lead? And there's many, many, many more resources in the neighborhood, to especially deal with younger children who are more directly affected. And if you've seen the demographics, and I keep talking about Southwest, but any policy that we work on affects the entire city. So we have partners everywhere that come to those meetings, because we want citywide policy, but it is important that once we find out what's happening, we go to the District 6 meetings, that district meetings, that we go to the Department of Neighborhood meetings, that we ask for more resources, or get connected, and tell them what we're experiencing.
Yeah, and like you said, I want to just emphasize what you said. You work in the Southwest Detroit, but the stuff you're talking about is a template for any neighborhood that wants to become more involved. I mean, these are, as you can see if you look on the the screen map that you just directed me to, we have much more in common with these concerns than we do different. And this is a good way for any organization can adapt this template to their of interactions and concerns. So yeah, that's a very helpful thing, I think, for anyone to know that this is a set of things that they can, tools that they can use. So I'm interested a little bit in when you reach out to businesses, when you reach out to, we've talked a lot about residents and how that works. When you reach out to business and government, what's the response, or what's the tone of the response if you?
It varies. So we have a healthy business and institutions program right now, funded by ERB. So it's really fantastic. We've been learning a lot ourselves. There's a lot of new resources for business, but one of the things that we're interested in doing is talking to them about how they can save money. That's kind of the foot in the door, and it's true. It's fantastic. It's not, we could look at that as a negative thing, like they're only doing it because, or whatever.
Right.
But it is a powerful incentive. It's when you're saving money, you're also conserving energy. So if we're looking at a building, one of our fantastic partners, Detroit 2030, told us, about some of the work that they did, and they helped a very large building save up to about 12% of energy consumption. And I think it's like in the $60,000 a year range. Like, that's huge. It's also, that means that we're not pulling from the system, and that, if we're using less, we're also needing to make less. And so it's a direct air quality impact, right? We're helping in that way. And so when we present businesses with that number, a lot of people perk up and say, wow, really? And so it's our way to get in, right? And once we're talking to them about that, we want to talk to them about the anti-idling ordinance. We want to ask, so that's another one that has a fuel efficiency and cost benefit. If I think I saw, so there's a lot of different numbers. I guess it depends on where this semi, or diesel truck is going. But one quote I saw was $25,000 a year in savings if they don't idle. We know that there are trucks that need to idle for their operation, but that's a very specialized kind of vehicles, or maybe they have those buckets, or but so the next thing we say is, if you stop idling or work with your fleet, your operators, your drivers to stop idling, you could save this much money. And you can kind of calculate what kind of class truck times where are they going, how many hours they use it during the day, and how much of that is idling. And it could be a significant amount of money. And I think for any business or nonprofit or any institution, you're working really hard to get that contract just so that you spend it on an idling vehicle. It doesn't make sense, right? So they're either on board and really interested. Of course, we all benefit from folks that don't idle in any part of the city. But we also do have a lot of industry that from what we understand, there is no ordinance or legislation that provided the motivation for them to really, it's all opting in. So they don't have to opt in. They can ignore it. There's not a lot of regulation for some industry. So we're thinking through that problem. We see other cities doing really great work, namely, for example, Green Bay's Green Ports is like they have legislation that helps people along the water work on these issues. And so we're seeing, we've been in contact with about 100 businesses in the last 2 years, and we have about 35 that have opted in. So that just gives you the number right there. Yeah. So, yeah.
I'd love to talk about some of the projects that you're doing, especially healthy living projects, health and environmental awareness projects. I'm thinking of the Cadillac Urban Gardens. So would you like to tell us a little bit about that?
Sure.
Or are there anything else that's going on?
Yeah, that's our fantastic urban garden that is up and running, probably April through end of October, depending on the weather. And so, Sarah Clark leads that project with a couple of interns and student workers, and then a lot of volunteers from the neighborhood. And I think, I'm trying to remember what the last number was, but in the last 2 years, I think we've given out, over 2 tons of fruits and vegetables to neighbors, to residents, to families that are in need. It might be a little there. I'm not sure if that's an updated number, but it's really, really exciting because during COVID, people came to get out and see people and, do something and be with other people, but also socially distanced, right?
Yeah, outdoors and yeah.
And it's often the entry point for us with the residents. Like they come either for an event. We host a lot of things there, a lot of meetings, a lot of other partners will, host like listening sessions, or they'll come in and, bring young people or students to plant and to work on projects. Like we've had a couple of greenhouses built. We also have some water catchments that are community projects. And so we work with a lot of students on a regular basis. And we can ask them questions and send them home with information around air quality. And so it's the beginning of a lot of our interaction. We were working with U of D on some research. And the question was, if we're drinking, I say drinking, but we're inhaling, we're consuming this air quality, so are the plants. And so we were also trying to understand how these particles affect how things grow and the quality of the fruits and vegetables that we're giving out. So it's a really great garden, and I think it's so Sarah has all the details, but it's the biggest one here, and I think it's the biggest garden in the state, like urban garden.
Oh, wow.
And we have also like I said, a lot of events. We're going to do an Earth Day event, like a community listening session where people can come and talk and meet and get some of these resources on April 22nd. And then we'll have a big celebration. August 3rd is our garden party. And we usually have really good music and lots of local chefs many of them are vegan. You don't even know. Like it's just beautiful food. But we have usually about 8 chefs that are local that use all of the vegetables from the garden to make the food, and people can sample other food and get to know them and invite them to their own events.
That's wonderful. In the sustainability space, what are some of the greatest challenges you're facing in the next 5 to 10 years?
So the workforce. I think that just from watching partners and there's an increased amount of funding, and we know there's going to be a lot of funding coming from the government with the IRA and ARPA funds, and we see that we all of a sudden need this like environmentally knowledgeable workforce that is interested or trained, and we are lagging. And I see it. And so we need to catch up really fast and probably develop projects or programs where people can learn on the job. But there's going to be a lot of projects. And we need a lot of knowledgeable people really soon, like fast. And so workforce it's also a beautiful opportunity, right? So
sure. Well, that's kind of the issue, right? Either there's not enough money, or there's like these times when federal funds or something becomes available, and then suddenly there's money, but there's not necessarily capacity. And that's not just in your space. That's federal funds for schools, but where are the tutors? Are there literally enough people to be tutors? It's happened. We saw this in 2009 with the housing crisis and federal neighborhood stabilization dollars rolling in. I mean, it's a feast or famine, right? And but this is, like you said, an opportunity. This is to create more jobs, to connect people to this type of work on a volunteer or professional basis. So that's a good that's an optimistic way to view it. That's a good uplifting way to look at it. So And yeah, so what has inspired you personally in this work?
So one of the things that we did as a team when I came on in 2019 is so this is more of an operations as an organization. We really sought to become lateral and, no power in the room. And we really worked on what does it look like to have everyone lead, not, I just didn't want to come in and, assume this position of leader and then sort of start telling, people what direction we're headed in. I thought, how do we become really lateral and everyone has access to, for example, the finances, the grants, like the processes, they can develop the processes alongside us and just really opening the door to, developing the potential in people. And so when people come to us, even interns, like you will see everything, you see back of house, you see everything, hoping that, and like I said, workforce and capacity building, that's anybody can say, I've done that. I've done the finances. I've done strategic planning. We know how to do this, and I can go lead an organization, or I can go and build a project. And, we really want to be learners and teachers all at once as a team. And I think, so that's one piece of it. But the other thing that's really inspiring is just how fast it's evolving and how courageous people are, and just, how much, for example, there's all these stakeholder teams in Detroit that, working with so many projects. If, for example, the Detroit Environmental Agenda, if you ever want to sit in and just see across the board, all of the projects that are evolving out of these sometimes 2-person nonprofits, like they're really tiny groups that can like shift a whole policy or a whole ordinance, or, and that to me is really amazing that, residents don't realize sometimes that if you come to a meeting with ideas and you're kind of educating us, or you're educating policymaker or your city council person or whoever, how much you can shape like the policies that are being made, around you. So that's been really fantastic. And I had one intern who was at one of the zoning meetings, and she was like, what's next? What else are we doing? Like, what are the policies on the board? And it just, you cannot believe that you have access to policy. You can't believe it until you do it. And then you think, yeah, I like this. I really like this a lot, and so we've seen a lot of people get really excited. It's also super sad when it doesn't work, and so that's a whole other conversation, because you have to lose sometimes, right? You can't win everything. And so it's also super disappointing sometimes.
What I'm hearing here is that you guys aren't just saying, oh, well, we do sustainability over here, and then we do something else here. Is the sustainability piece is through your organization, that you're thinking about how you can bring people along to so that you're developing a sustainable organization. It's not just like, oh, sustainability is a thing we do, and then we this is really woven into the fabric of your whole environment. That's awesome. So I think we have time for one more question, and it's a pretty big question, but I'm going to ask you to handle it as quickly as possible. So in the future of the city of Detroit, what is the role of sustainability, and what does Detroit 2050 look like?
So that's a really beautiful question. And, I just want to reframe it, so what is the role of sustainability? What does it look like in Detroit, right? And so if you replace that with health, what is the role of health, for residents in Detroit, right? So really that's what the question is. Like, what are the policies that are going to protect residents and protect our water, which was so critical. It's so critical. What kind of, policies can be, like, what kind of policies do we need? Do we have that we need to work on, or do we need that we don't have, that can bring industry along gently, in a non-punitive way, that we say, hey, you've got 2 or 3 years let's work on this, and let's develop um, along together. And also, just, not only ordinances, but enforcement. We need enforcement. We need the city to invest in having people in the neighborhoods actually looking at what's happening. Again, and not in a punitive way, but like in an educational, what if we were like educating people and coming and saying, hey, this is a policy, maybe you're not aware. Let's do some training. Or
Right.
but I think that the city of Detroit, they are so interwoven, because sustainability could be the conservation of resources, and we can see it that way. But really, that is that doesn't put people first. It puts resources or a business first. And so how do we bring people to the forefront in this practice? It doesn't have to be, exclusive, right? Mutually exclusive. And so we have a lot to do in Detroit, a lot of policies that need to be freshened up and brought into up to date. And I think there's a lot of really fantastic opportunities for business. There's a lot of funding. There's a lot of education. And so I think we need to imagine a city that it protects both businesses and residents, and where they're not often having to be kind of like rivals or something. And what does the city look like when we need to imagine a city that has great air quality? How do we get there? How do we work backwards from that and evolve those policies into that vision of great air quality, great water quality? And how do we do that? So, we need to start with the end in mind.
Okay, well, this is wonderful. I've truly enjoyed our conversation today, and I have to say, like, you're like just really optimistic, like here for education, here for sustainability. Like, this is exactly who I want to know is working on these amazing issues, the super important issues about our health and our environment in my community. And so it's really an honor and a pleasure for me to get to meet you and have this conversation with you. And I just wanted to say thank you for your time and your insight and sharing everything that you at Southwest Detroit Environmental Vision are doing for sustainability in our community, in our city, in Southeast Michigan, in America, in the world. So really, thank you so much and have a great week.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you for tuning in to the Sustainable Business Network Detroit, the Green Stream podcast. Remember to like, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Make sure to follow us on SBN-Detroit.org and stay tuned for more conversations on sustainability from inside and around the city.